everybody. My name is Giles Fraser. I'm the vicar here. I've just, my job is to really say welcome and to tell you where the loos are. I'm way too politically prejudiced to be chairing this or doing anything other than telling you where the loos are, which are over there and over there. They're both on the right and on the left, so I'm not giving you any sort of political steer by telling you where the loos are whatsoever. Very nice to see you all. We are going to finish 9 o'clock sharp, and if there are people who want to come, there's still some seats, certainly this side. And I'll just introduce you to Evan, who is a local resident. No, he's the other side of the road, so actually, but he's a local resident and it's very kindly agreed to come and look after the proceedings. So, Evan,
thank you very much. So, we have about little under 2 hours to help you make up your mind about who to vote for on June the 8th. Now, I want to do a little show of hands here, not about which candidate you're supporting, but I want you to be honest. How many of you have not totally, 100% made up your mind who you're going to vote for? So, how many of you have not totally made up your mind who you're going to vote for? Can I ask how many of you have totally made up your mind who you're going to vote for? So it's about half and half. So we welcome contributions from all, because it's a debate. Those of you who have made up your mind, you're involved as well to help persuade those who haven't made up their mind. Now, to me, it has felt like a very strange election, this one. If you look at it, we're only 2 years since the last election, and both parties, in quite large measure, have reinvented themselves. So Corbyn's Labour, in a way, is a little different to the Labour that went before. Some would say not that different, but it certainly feels a little bit different, and Corbyn is different to Ed Miliband. Theresa May's manifesto, released the other day, basically repudiates a lot of things we thought the Conservative Party previously believed in. So the parties have to some extent changed. The country has changed too, because we have suddenly got a division that is less about left and right, and sometimes more about Brexit and Remain and globalisation and economic patriotism. And my reading on this is that the candidates are more important in this election than they have ever been. You may be a Remain Tory who doesn't like Theresa May's plans for Brexit. You may want to look at what your candidate thinks before you determine whether you're going to vote Tory. You may be an anti-Corbyn Labour or a pro-Corbyn Labour supporter who says, I'm going to see what my Labour candidate thinks before I decide whether I'm going to vote Labour. So this is one of those elections where candidates matter more than ever before, which is why we're here, because we have the 6 candidates for Bermondsey and Old Southwark. Our format this evening is going to be that I will give them up to 2 minutes to make an opening pitch, so you know who they are and what they stand for. We will then have the kind of usual question time format. Some of you have submitted questions. Some of you may have submitted questions and not be here. So I may call people who are not here to give a question, but we'll read questions out to people who are not here. If I call you to read your question, if you can't remember your question, don't worry. You're not going to have a mic, you're just going to stand up and bawl your question, and I will repeat it if people can't hear it. There will be plenty of time for comment and sort of supplementary questions on each topic, and I will leave a little bit of time for kind of free questions, other questions as well. So then I'll give the candidates a minute at the end to summarise again why you should vote them. Okay, everybody comfortable with the proceedings and the format? Everybody know where we are? Okay, let me just introduce in alphabetical order the candidates. Siobhan Bailey is the Conservative Party candidate. Siobhan was a councillor for Frognall and Fitzjohns in Camden, and is a family law solicitor, essentially. Next to Siobhan is James Clark, who is standing as an independent, is a local businessman. What is your business, James?
It's a textile.
Tech startup, not textile. I thought you said textile. Tech startup. James is an anti-Brexit campaigner, independent. Neil Coyle, next to me here, is the Labour Party candidate and won the seat of Bermondsey and Old Southwark at the last election. So he's been an MP for 2 years. He won it with a 14% score. Was previously a councillor in Southwark Council. Sir Simon Hughes, to my right, is the man who Neil Coyle won it from, deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats between 2010 and 2014. In fact, he's twice run for the leadership of the Liberal Democrat Party, has been a candidate for the Mayor of London, and famously won the seat in a controversial by-election in the seat that was then Bermondsey back in 1983. And I think I'm right in saying, Simon, it remains the largest by-election swing in UK political history, 44.2%. At the end, Elizabeth Jones is the UKIP candidate, a family solicitor living in Clapham, and is the Lambeth chairwoman for UKIP. And Tyson, that's why John is last, John Tyson is the Green candidate, a chartered accountant and housing campaigner. Can we please hear it for the candidate? So we're going to get the opening statements now. I'm going to do that in a different order, and I'm going to ask James Clark to make the first opening statement. With the microphone, James, stand up and make your opening.
Hello, everyone.
Does the mic work?
Works if you turn it on. My name's James Clark, and I am the only independent candidate for Bermondsey and Old Southwark this year. I live in Elephant Castle, and I work in Southwark for a tech startup. Why did I decide to stand? Two main reasons. One was the outcome of the EU referendum, which I felt was a colossal own goal. And the second reason was the day when Mr Corbyn said out loud that the Labour Party was not wedded to freedom of movement in principle. For me, that was a jaw-dropping moment. I thought, who's going to stand for people like me, and who could I vote for? So I'm standing on a pro-Europe, pro-business, pro-London platform, plus drug liberalisation and taxation, and the removal of religious teaching from primary schools. People ask, why are you standing on a pro-EU platform when you have so many candidates in Bermondsey and Old Southwark who also stand for that? And the answer is this: I believe that all of the mainstream political parties are complicit in the political chaos that we have at the moment. The Tories were clearly the architects of it. Labour's response to the referendum before, during and after, I felt was pathetic. The Liberal Democrats, less so, but it must be admitted that if they'd done slightly better in the coalition, we would not be in the position that we are now. So I believe that you can vote red, yellow, blue, green, or I'm going to say brown, your whole voting lives, but perhaps you ought not to. This year, I think it's important to send a message to Westminster and to the mainstream political parties and say, you have let us down. This year, if any, is the one where you should think independent and vote independent. My name's James.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. James Clark. Okay, second up is John Tyson for the Greens. John.
Good evening, all. Thank you very much to our hosts for the venue this evening and for all of you for attending. I'm going to take a second to do something which might surprise you. I'm going to talk about a lady who lived about 150 years ago, Elizabeth Fry. The reason why I'm mentioning her is because, in fact, actually today is her birthday. Elizabeth Fry, as many of you hopefully will know, not only on the £5 note, but was a campaigner for penal reform. She was a woman who, of her age, decided that, in fact, actually, those people who were in prison, though many would consider them to be worst people of the world, were in fact actually people who deserved a better ride, who basically were not getting a very basic level that they needed. And I think that's one of the things that the Green Party is really committed to, is actually social justice and making sure that people really do actually get a fair crack at the whip. There are many people out there who, at the moment, are left aside. Theresa May is just about managing. What about those who aren't managing at all? Whether it be our social housing situation, whether it be our schools, the Tory party in particular, but also some of the other parties' policies have not actually really been supporting those who really actually need help and making sure that society remains fair. If you look at our tax system, again, it's really sort of not actually making things better. The income distribution in this country has gotten worse progressively over the last 30 years and continues to do so. Society at the moment is not fair, yet we have more than enough. We're one of the richest countries in the world. We just need to get better at sharing. So I'm thinking back today to Elizabeth Fry as somebody who stood up for people who had less than they needed, who didn't have a basic standard of living and care, and making sure that we all just consider them. So thank you.
Okay, third is going to be Elizabeth from the UKIP party.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here tonight, and thank you to our organisers for putting this on. As our chairman kindly announced, I am Elizabeth Jones. I'm the UKIP candidate for this constituency. Now, the big issues of this snap election are Brexit and the state of our public services. Before you tonight, you have an array of candidates, all of whom voted to remain in the European Union. I am the only candidate on your ballot paper who voted to leave the European Union, because UKIP believes in Britain, UKIP believes in Brexit, and a vote for UKIP is a vote for Brexit. You will hear a lot tonight about hard Brexit and soft Brexit and second referendums on Brexit. I believe, as your UKIP candidate, that we, the British people, have already had that vote, and there was a very high voter turnout, as you're aware. The die has been cast, the British people have spoken and made their decision. A vote for UKIP, for me, will ensure that we enact that decision which was made by this nation. In the meantime, UKIP has further work to do to build a better Britain, because we know that our public services are stretched to breaking point due to decades of uncontrolled immigration. This country must have an ethically based immigration policy, not one based on membership to a trading bloc, not one based on membership to a customs union, not one based on the colour of your skin, but one based on skills, talent, and energy. And finally, I pledge to you, in this wonderful constituency, where Millwall, our football team, won...
Sorry, your time is up. I'm going to be firm on the only statement time. You can come back to it. Our fourth opening statement is going to come from Trevor Bailey, the Conservative Party.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Turn it off. Thank you. Okay, can you hear me now? Thank you. Well, listen, I believe that it's been the Lib Dem and Labour show for far too long here. And it is outrageous that you may hear from Simon Hughes that it's a wasted vote to vote for anyone other than Labour or Lib Dems. He's even putting it on his leaflets. It's also rather ironic because his own leader is saying that he's not going to win these elections, so their promises in their manifesto are pretty irrelevant. The only way that they will be in government is to prop up Jeremy Corbyn. And for Labour, even Neil Coyle doesn't believe in Jeremy Corbyn. He doesn't want him as his leader. So how can he possibly ask you to cast a vote for him that could put Jeremy Corbyn in number 10, causing chaos? I put it to you that they are the ones that are wasted votes, and you should believe in me because I can do better for you. The Conservatives are committed to creating a country that works for everybody. And this is really important. I am not from a privileged background. I am a free school meal kid with divorced parents, no university education, and I've stood here before you wonderful people because of my Conservative values.
And to me, a country that works for everyone means that we have to ensure that every home, school, business and community group is strong and resilient, and we have to believe that they can absolutely fulfil their own potential. It is not good enough to not be striving for the best deals in jobs, education, health, housing and transport. We shouldn't be spending our time blaming each other or pretending there's some magic money tree, and the poor decisions of the Lib Dem and Labour here have let you down. And if anybody can communicate the benefits of aspiration and hard work to our young people, it's me. I started as a secretary, I worked my way up to qualify as a solicitor, and I spent 17 years in the private sector.
And it's time up, I'm afraid, so we'll have to hear about the rest of your career. Thank you very much. Right, I have 2 candidates left. I'm going to ask Simon Hughes, Sir Simon Hughes, to take the stand, please.
Evan Giles and friends, thank you very much for the invitation. It's very good to be here again. I used to hold service on a regular basis here as well. I've been a Liberal since I was a teenager, and I've always thought of myself as being in the Lloyd George and Beveridge tradition, a social Liberal determined to attack the establishment and determined to try to produce the fairer society, and that's absolutely my view. And in this election, there are going to be national, international issues, there are going to be national issues, local issues that you're all got to decide about. I've been a passionate European and internationalist all my life, and I believe that at the end of this negotiation process, it's unacceptable that a Tory Prime Minister, Tory Cabinet or Tory majority in the House of Commons, because I fear that's what it will be, makes the decision. I think you, the people, should read the terms, and then you, the people, should decide whether we should stay or leave. And there are other international issues which I've been passionate about, climate change, international development, which we can no doubt explore. The local big issues are funding our health and social care services. We're committed to supporting an extra penny on income tax to do that, particularly for mental health in this sort of area, a huge, huge issue. And sadly, the Labour government closed the Maudsley 24-hour clinic. We've got to support education from childcare right through to adults who need to reskill. We've got to make sure that we challenge the public authorities who insist on building housing that nobody can afford. We have a Labour Council that's done a lot of that and supported a lot of that since 2010, and not supporting nonsense like the Garden Bridge. Locally, we want an MP who's accessible, who's visible, who's effective, and who's engaged. I came here in my 20s because I wanted to live here, and I ask you to look at the record and judge that somebody who's a lawyer who knows about European law might be a useful community activist in the next 5 years. It would be a privilege to be the MP here.
Right, our last opening statement comes from Neil Coyle for the Labour Party.
Is this on? Could be. Could be. Is it now? Can you hear me? Brilliant, thank you. Right, thank you for coming to what I consider my community. I was a councillor here for 6 years, and I lived on Crampton Street round the corner for 5. I helped with many people here found the Wall Society locally, and when the Northern Line extension plans were coming forward, I spoke at the public inquiry to try and get the best deal for our community. And I was elected in 2015 to Parliament to continue trying to get the best deal for our community with a simple promise, that I will never vote for anything that will harm our community. And I made that promise because of broken Lib Dem promises, not just on tuition fees. Simon had the trust of people here for many, many years, but when he had the chance to be in government and make a difference, a positive difference in people's lives, he let our community down. He voted for the bedroom tax, he voted to cut legal aid, which left families without access to justice, and he voted to cut the budget for affordable housing. He voted with the Tories 1,000 times, causing a lot of damage to our community. He has never apologised for that damage, and that is why he lost in 2015. I have kept my promise. I've been fighting the last 2 years for the genuinely affordable housing we need. Is it on? For the genuinely affordable housing we need. I've been fighting for the education resources we need, instead of the Tory cuts, sorry, to deafen you. The Tory cuts would mean 5 million is taken out of Southwark schools, damaging your children and grandchildren's future. And I've been fighting for the police to have the resources they need. Knife crime is too high, it's coming back up because of police cuts in the last 7 years. We've seen commercial burglaries, mobile phone and bike thefts going unsolved, under-investigated. And I've kept my promise on Brexit. Brexit would definitely harm our community, and I've kept my promise. I didn't just campaign against it in the referendum, alongside Lib Dems and Green members who still support me today. I've been consistent. I voted against triggering Article 50, and I voted against the Brexit bill at every stage. I will never vote to downgrade our economy, downgrade our country, and downgrade future opportunities. So, you have a choice on the 8th of June. You've been told to fight between the Lib Dems and Labour. You can have Sir Simon of broken promises, or you can have me. I've kept my promises with your support. I'll continue to keep my promise to you for another 5 years.
Okay. Now, thank you all for your opening statements. I'm going to take some questions now. And let's just have a show of hands. How many of you would class yourself as Remain supporters? How many of you would class yourself as Leave supporters? We'll call it probably 90-10. Okay, now the first question, I think is, let's get Brexit out of the way. So let's do Brexit. Is Melanie first here? Is Melanie here? Yeah, then you submitted a question, and I want you to shout your question to us. I'll repeat it over here, because that's going to get us started on Brexit.
So, while this constituency voted Remain in the referendum, most people, whether Leave or Remain, want Britain to get the best deal possible for Brexit. What will candidates do to ensure this happens?
Okay, so the basic question is, what will the candidates do to ensure Britain gets the best possible deal from Brexit? That is our opening question. I wonder if I can ask you, Siobhan, to start. Would you like us to stand up while speaking? Yes. I think we'll stand up while speaking.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I campaigned for Remain, as you've heard. I think the disaster of not getting a good deal is putting Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. I would say, Neil, you said that you promised you would never do anything to harm this community, but you did nominate him. And I think the second disaster would be a second referendum. People don't want it. I've been on doorsteps, I've been speaking to people in this constituency. They don't want it now, they don't want it hanging over the negotiations. And I think to get the best deal, we shouldn't be outraged and negative and looking backwards and rerunning the old arguments, as you may hear tonight. We are leaving the EU, we are not leaving Europe, but we need to unite and accept the results. So I'm pleased with the tone of the question, actually. I think it's worth remembering my day job, which is not dissimilar from Elizabeth's, but I think a professional career doing divorce all day, when clients come into my office, and we think about this as the biggest divorce we're going to deal with, but if the clients come into my office, I don't let them waste energy and money and time looking backwards, worrying about broken promises and who let down who had a terrible date night in 2005. My job is to do future building. So you need someone that is clear-headed, someone that's practical and positive, and that's what I am. I'm moving forward. I want to get the best deal for Bermondsey and Southwark. So how do we build a new future here? I'll be very quick. Yeah, very, very quick. No, there's just so much to say. There you go. So the first thing I would do, so four very quick points. The first thing I do, I think we can all agree in the room that we've got to look after our EU citizens. They bring great benefits for this city. We want to give them some security in their housing and reciprocal rights for the British citizens in Europe. Closest possible trading for Europe, frictionless trading, and while working on trading deals for other countries as well. I'd like a full review about the pressure points for Bermondsey and Old Southwark, businesses, students, our universities, and think about that. And the final one, a strong voice in me, and a strong voice and strong and stable leadership in Theresa May. I'll get that in early so you can laugh, and make sure that it's Theresa May running these negotiations and not Jeremy Corbyn chaos. Thank you.
How many of you would like a second referendum? How many of you don't want a second referendum? On the deal. Can I just ask you, Siobhan, your manifesto...
I didn't give some light on that.
Is my mic on? I've got a special. Not that special. Is it on? Can you hear me now? Siobhan, can I ask you, your manifesto says we will leave the customs union and leave the single market. Do you support both of those in your manifesto, those propositions?
I do support that. I think
your preference is to leave the customs union?
I think it's a way to, European Union have said and been clear that we would need to sign up to full free movement of people, which is not something that I believe the country voted for. We need to prioritise strong immigration, looking after people that are coming here to work and contribute to our community. But ultimately, the single market does mean signing up to their rules. They're playing hardball. I think we've got to start from the position as I've got all the 12 points in the Lancaster House speech, but yeah, I think.
Neil, what would you do to make the best possible deal?
So, the referendum, let's look at that. Immigration was a proxy in that referendum. People said they couldn't get the right, they couldn't get their kid into the school they wanted, couldn't see a GP quick enough, couldn't get the house they needed, and they blamed the immigrant. And they were encouraged to do that by racists like Nigel Farage and the UKIP party. They were egged on by certain Tories, Ian Duncan-Smith, and all those who, they don't think twice, they barely think once. They caused a lot of damage. But that proxy situation is really important, because the reason people could not get into that school, get that house, was because we'd had years of the squeeze on public services and on the public sector voted for by Lib Dems like Simon Hughes. They voted to cut those services, they put that squeeze on, they put that pressure on people, and they contributed to that blame game that has a very nasty and vicious ending. And we've seen the rise in hate crime, we've seen some of that damage come through since. We've seen the rise of the far right, and it is... Sure. Well, look. Theresa May has been honest on this. She has said her best deal is worse than we have now. And why anyone would vote for a worse deal than we have now is beyond me. So, if Tories and others want to explain to me how they will better fund universities who are already losing international students and losing access to research funding, because they're not saying that they'll pay more towards it, they'll ask British students to pay more to go to university. And I don't think that was on the cards. Which hospitals and social care services do you not want to run because the employers can't get the workforce they need? What businesses do you want to close and keep moving out? Because I've seen that here already. That is not a good deal for this country. If I said to you, Evan, if you've got a tenner in your pocket, I'll give you a fiver for it, would you vote for that? Because that's what's on the table. I will not vote for such a bad deal. That's fundamentally, that is my position.
The party did vote for that, so what will you...
I am saying, fundamentally, I will not vote on that, and no MP should be voted to down... I am saying, no MP should vote to downgrade our economy. So I will not vote. If I am re-elected, your MP, on the 8th of June, you know right now I will never vote to leave the European Union. That is my basic position. I've got asked if it's been triggered, we can rescind that triggering, and I would support, if there aren't enough MPs to have the courage to not vote down, to downgrade our economy, then I would support a second in-out referendum, as David Lammy put forward first, a Labour MP, after the first referendum.
I think one of the first steps that Theresa May should take in order to get us the best Brexit deal is hold a Commonwealth summit as soon as possible. There are 52 countries in the Commonwealth, and we have neglected them. There are long-term allies and friends. They are our natural allies, they're our natural trade partners. We need to reignite that relationship. It's a very, very important relationship. We are here now in Southwark. Southwark was absolutely bombed to blazes in the Blitz. Who came to our aid? Who actually had the courage to stand shoulder to shoulder with British soldiers? It was our Commonwealth cousins.
The French, the Poles...
in the Commonwealth that we need to re-engage with. They have felt neglected by Britain, and rightly so. So let's re-engage as soon as forward. Yeah, we'll do. Now, as regard to foreign investment, there's very significant foreign investment going on right now as we speak. On a small scale, we've got Leon, the food chain. That's recently had £25 million worth of foreign inward investment. Newell, the French drama company, has just invested 42 million in English drama. I believe that we will have a very golden, rosy future if we just allow Theresa May to go ahead. Yes, leave the customs union. Yes, leave the single market. Let's be bold, let's be brave, and let's embrace the Commonwealth. And no more trade sanctions.
And Elizabeth, what do you say that most of the Commonwealth countries wanted us to stay in the European Union?
Facts are that we have voted to leave. That is a fact.
So what you're saying is
yes.
The Commonwealth would say best means to stay in the European Union.
That is done. That moment has passed in time. We will not be having a second referendum. We have to move forward and we have to embrace it.
And just a relationship, just a detailed point, but the Indians have made clear, Indians make clear that one of the things it would like, if we were to sign a treaty, is for more liberal rights for Indian people to come settle and to arrive in the UK. Would you be happy with that if that was the price of a trade deal with India?
Of course I would. If that was yes, if that's an appropriate mix, if that fits in with the Immigration Rules, Immigration Act, entirely legal, and it suits our economy, of course.
John, why don't you tell us your Green position on how to invest and
Thank you, Alan. So obviously the situation we're in is one that we're in, it's easy to say. But imagine, effectively, that rather than going, we've got all the emotion and everything that came out last year. I actually joined the Green Party last year specifically because of the referendum. Imagine you're starting from scratch right now. Imagine you just walked into the room and this is the situation you've got to deal with. You've got a referendum that happened last year and you've got sort of a mandate out there. Not exactly the clearest mandate in the world, 52%, not perfect. You still have the option of actually going back and saying, actually, we did vote on this, we changed our mind. We have to keep that there. The Green Party absolutely is going to have a referendum if we push for it. But also, why is the Tory government being so secretive about everything? Why is it all about having these negotiations behind closed doors? We speak about them as European partners, but in fact, actually, we're treating them as enemies. We're in fact actually not engaging with the people that we're trying to have this deal with. So I would very much push Theresa May to actually be open, to be engaged, to be actually speaking, and more important than that, making sure that actually people in the UK who are not sure what's going on with their lives. I have a French friend who fortunately is married to an American lady who has British citizenship. His citizenship suddenly came into doubt, all that it suddenly came into question. There's no sense of the human being and making sure that actually the people who are really affected by this, who might have to go back to countries that they didn't plan to go back to, are actually cared for, are catered for, are considered as part of this process. We need to be working together, not against each other. And that's actually how we get the best deal out of anything, whether it be Brexit, whether it be the housing crisis, whether it be the NHS. Let's work together on things rather than working apart.
Before James goes, John, can I suggest you said you would favour a second referendum at some point?
Yes, the Green Party policy is about...
After we reach a deal or fail to reach a deal, we vote on the terms of the deal, or...
So the terms of the Green Party referendum would be a three-way vote, effectively. So again, sort of questioning again the in-out aspect of it, and then deciding whether or not the deal actually works for us, or whether or not we leave without the deal. So that's the current...
No deal, the deal, or stay.
Yes.
Basically, would be a
James.
To answer the question, a second referendum, yes, on similar terms that the Green Party has suggested. Failing that, we need to ensure passporting of financial services. And we also need to protect freedom of movement for young people, particularly, for startups particularly, and for skilled workers particularly. I think it's a tragedy that the young people who turned 18 since the referendum unlikely to have the rights and benefits to live, marry, work, own property in Europe that I had my entire life. But it's not just about us here, it's about everyone. There's been a bit of a tendency to resignation, a little bit of despair perhaps. It ain't over yet. There's 2 years to go, and there's a lot of fighting that can be done. We mustn't shrug and say, mustn't grumble. Grumble, let's grumble, get things done. Thanks.
You voted for the last election? You didn't vote at the last election? Right, I think Simon, your problem is that the distinctive dividend policy is to have a second referendum, and yet we now have 1, 2, 3 other candidates also advocating the same policy.
Let me answer the question about the best possible deal, but also deal with that. In my first statement, I didn't make any comments critical of anybody else on the platform, but I'm not going to allow nonsense to be promulgated. And there's a sort of naive personal view of history, which both Elizabeth has propagated, suggesting that the world can be divided into pro-Europe, pro-Commonwealth, or forget the rest, whereas some of us believe that actually we should be neighbours and friends working with Europe, with the Commonwealth, and with the rest, and I've always sought to do that. We have many Commonwealth and EU citizens in this community. Our names: Nigerians, Sierra Leoneans, Bangladeshis, and many people from all of Europe. And Neil suggested that the reason the referendum result went the way it did was because the Liberal Democrats went into a coalition for 5 years with the Tories. Just very quietly, Neil, if you look at the figures, you'll see public expenditure went up from 650 billion when we took over to 772 billion when we finished, and you'll see that the gap between the rich and the poor closed. So I don't think you can blame us on making Britain poorer. We inherited from you a dreadful mess, which we tried to put right. The answer is the specific, but why a second referendum will be helpful for us to get a better deal. And I think public opinion may get there. I think the press, I think business may start when the pound goes down, when businesses start leaving, when people realise the disadvantages to Britain and the economy starts looking worse. They may say, for heaven's sake, we need another say. And I think the move will change, the Tories will come on board, there'll be Labour people who will come on board, and I think in the end, it may be that the fact that may happen may guarantee the best deal. But I'll just give you a list because we don't have time. The things on my list, starting from day one, are the rights of EU citizens here to be protected and the rights of UK citizens abroad. It's got to be done early. And then down the list, a free market for all the people who need you, consultants, scientists. There are lots of routes where, bluntly, not to allow them to come and go would be nonsense. A single market, ideally. A customs union, ideally. The Erasmus programme, absolutely wonderful and valuable, must be preserved. The ability to use the European restaurant to bring people back who fled having committed crimes here. The health insurance system which we collectively share. And lastly, I know it sounds sort of incidental, all the sorts of benefits that we've won on environmental rights, equal pay right, all those things, they all come from Europe. A lot of those things are derived from European British. So I have a list, and given my background, I would start literally on day one, working down that list, and give the Prime Minister and the government as hard a time as possible. But I fear to tell you, it will be Mrs May, and it will be a Tory government, and we just have to make sure that there is no hiding place.
You've heard the claim that it's going to be a Tory government, and so Mrs May will be leading the negotiation. She had promised to be strong and stable. Would it be strong and stable if we walk out of the EU without any kind of deal, with a question mark over whether claims are allowed to leave that country because we haven't aviation rights agreed? We can't fly to the US because our aviation rights in the US are currently governed by EU laws. We won't be able to get radiology staff at hospitals because Euratom and the European Court governed the trade in those things. Is that going to be strong and stable, or is that potentially deeply a promise of trouble?
I don't think there's anything we can all be about Theresa May. Listen, it's a negotiation stance, And if I was acting for a client and if I was going to court, you need to understand what your back position is, and that is the back position. Theresa May has said very, very clearly it's not what she wants. The aim is to secure the best deal and deal with all the different things that you've heard today. But ultimately, she is not prepared to accept or sign up to a bad deal for the country that she knows is going to be harmful. So I think it's a sensible stance. I think it's the beginning of, we've got the negotiations starting.
It's a sensible stance.
A sensible negotiation point.
That we might crash out of the EU.
It's a sensible.
No deal. The car supply chain.
I accept it's not desirable, it's not what I want, it's not what Theresa May wants, but it's...
pressure on Theresa May to take a different position in the negotiation.
Well, part of this election and this snap election, or the majority of this snap election, she has made it very clear that she wants to strengthen her hand in the negotiations. She wants a greater mandate to go to the EU to negotiate. If you hire lots of Remain voting, sensible, clear-headed Tories like me, I won't be able to put pressure on that. But in terms of it's the back position that she doesn't want it, it's not what I want, I imagine nobody in this room wants it, but it has to be the back position.
I'm so sorry for pushing on this, it's just so important, and I know it's important to the audience here. The question is, will you put pressure on Theresa May to come to a deal? Or will you say, oh well, they'll be unreasonable, we'll just have to go along with it?
Of course I will put pressure on Theresa May. And that's what I was saying.
Labour have made very clear they will remain in the customs union rather than fall out of the EU with no deal. And it's very likely we would get a deal if we said we want to remain in the customs union. Would you put pressure on Theresa May to stay in the customs union rather than leave without it?
I actually think we don't know that yet. We don't know whether it's a hypothetical.
Labour's position is very clear. Would you put pressure on Theresa May to stay in the customs union rather than crash out?
I would put pressure on Theresa May to get the best deal, and I think the customs union is a part. No, but the customs union, we're actually there's a number of different issues here that are being traded. We've seen them trying to buy things and ask for cash. That will form part of the negotiations, and I just don't think it's going to be as simple as that. So we get. Thank you.
Let's take some contributions from Brian. Sorry, I just wanted to change your position. Absolutely crystal clear. Right, you're going to stand up and you're going to shout, okay? Your points or questions. We've got a gentleman right at the back on the there. So,
Mr. Chairman, there's one thing we can all unite on in this church right now, and that is none of us has the slightest clue what will emerge from negotiations, obvious already from the discussion. Therefore, we've got to think about that. On one hand, there could be a deal which would be acceptable. I think it's unlikely because it would be desperately difficult, possible. On the other hand, as you made clear yourself, it could be an absolute disaster. And what I want to ask is, every candidate, who will decide that? When this deal is done, who will decide? Is it going to be Theresa May or strong and stable Birch or whatever it is? Is it going to be the Tory cabinet? Is it going to be Parliament, which will certainly, and let's not have any other thought about this, pretty well dominated by Conservatives, certainly many more than now, or what?
Thank you very much. The difficulty answering it is that Parliament will have a say.
What sort of say?
Well, the question is what's the alternative to the say they're given? So they will be voting on a deal, and if they vote it down, then we're back into the world of no deal but leave. What Parliament will not be given under the Tory plan is the option of vote down the deal and then remain.
Why?
That would be obviously under the Dem position and Neil Coyle's position. There'll be a second in our way. We'll contest the lady in the second row here, and then we'll take it.
Hi, I just want to make very clear that a second referendum, or as what Neil Coyle you said, never ever voting on Brexit, even if your constituents voted to leave. That's calling into question the is fundamentally anti-democratic. I mean, the anti-democratic sentiment among the candidates is palpable. And I just wonder, for those of you who are, saying that you will actually completely trample on the will of the people, how come any of your constituents, most of you are Remain, but who will believe that democracy is important and it's fundamental, and who want to get the best deal out of Brexit, who want Brexit to happen, who are not unreasonable people, as it seems some of you are, how do you expect them to trust you on all the other issues, up in this campaign, if you won't hold democracy, you will not support the democratic will of this nation?
Can I just ask, do you think having a second referendum on the specific time would be anti-democratic because it's kind of best at three?
It's very clear, especially from the kind of candidates who are going not allowing for the second referendum, that second referendum would mean an attempt to overturn Brexit. Let's be clear on that.
Neil, how do you answer that, Sean?
So one of the reasons I'm still very angry about this issue is, people were lied to. There were lies through the teeth. There were lies plastered on the side of buses to deceive people into voting for something that they're not going to get. 350 million for the NHS, you're more likely to get a stampede of unicorns down Kennington Park. That is not going to happen. And I'm angry because it was an advisory referendum, and 13 million people didn't vote. And this government denied 16 and 17-year-olds a vote at all. And in Scotland, when Scotland had a referendum members of the UK, 16 and 17-year-olds were guaranteed a vote. The same 16 and 17-year-olds in the UK, across the UK, were denied a stand of future. And I go round the schools and colleges locally, and I know how angry they are, and how they know that their opportunities are being undermined. And I talk to, every week I go campaigning, and not just in election time, although it's helping with the tan now, losing some weight, but I go round and I see the people who've changed their mind since. Last weekend I was in Rotherhithe, and a mum told me that when her daughter got back from university and found out she'd voted out, they had a huge row. And I think, the negative of the Remain campaign, the Stronger In campaign, who backed me here, by the way, the negative of that campaign was that we didn't encourage enough intergenerational conversation. Now, that might sound geeky, but it's grandparents talking to their grandchildren in particular. And, when I'm out and I meet the people who know they were lied to and say they've changed their mind since, but see the damage coming through the system. And you've talked about the automotive sector. It's not just about having to pay an extra £1,500 to export a car to the EU. It's local jobs are on the line here.
But the truth is, Nigel, suppose the results have got me out of the way, and Nigel Farage has stood up and said it was only 48-52, it's hardly a vote, and we voted like this, and there were lots of polls we go to because they would just be given British citizenship. Would you have said, oh yes, actually it was invalid?
The same position would remain true, that you need MPs who will stand up and make sure they will not vote for anything they know will harm our community, whether constituency voted in or out. I did for an advisory referendum, and I also voted for 16 and 17-year-olds to have a vote.
When you said you voted for an advisory referendum, when you campaigned to people for Remain, as you did, did you say, by the way, this is just advisory, interested in your opinion? You know, we may or may not take your advice on
we have parliamentary democracy because you elect MPs to stand up for the constituents they represent and the long-term interest, not just of their constituents but the whole country, and that's what I will continue to do if I'm re-elected here.
That's a good point, but there is a very good answer. And that is that we don't have a tradition of referenda in Britain. It's very unusual. In my lifetime, there were very few. In your lifetime, very few. It is always consultative. And referenda are consultative. They don't decide. I was always nervous, and when we were in government, didn't support the idea of a referendum on this basis. We said, we agreed with the Tories to pin the Tories down. We negotiated, and you'll remember, that there would be a referendum in one circumstance, if there was a proposal to take more powers from the UK to Brussels. That's when we said there should be a referendum. The answer to your question is, if the public decided, which is what they did, that we should go through a door marked Brexit without knowing any of the terms or the details at all, there is an absolute logic in asking the same people to make the decision at the end of the process. An absolute logic. And my answer to the gentleman that links to that. I do not believe a Tory Prime Minister A Tory candidate, or Tory MP, the Tory party, should decide the future of my country for the next 50 years. I don't accept that. They may get a majority of seats in Parliament under our ridiculously unrepresentative system, but they almost certainly won't get a majority of the votes of the country, because no government, bar two, ever since the Second World War, has ever got a majority of the votes of this country. So absolutely the people should decide. That is much more acceptable to me than giving it back to the Tory party. And I hope that people here will be persuaded of that and signing away all sorts of rights for generations. And it would work the same way if we'd had the result in the other direction. I bet you there would eventually have been people who would have come back saying we must vote again in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. So it applies absolutely clearly in both directions. Madam, you're absolutely wrong. It is not undermining democracy. I believe in democracy, but I trust the people more than I trust the Tory party.
It's just respectfully, you did a sweeping, people don't want this and anti-democratic, but actually I was very clear, I want people to unite, get on with this, and actually have a very clear approach to going forward with negotiations, and I will get on with it. The Lib Dems saying that referendums are rare, they are not rare if they don't like the answer to them. They have the alternative vote referendum, and you heard Sir Simon talking about that again today. We do not want referendum after referenda just because somebody does not like the vote. It has to stop, and we have to get on with this now.
Just a quick one to you, Elizabeth. Would you have accepted the result for, say, 30, 40, 50 years if it had gone the other way by the same line?
Yes, because I discussed this. No. Well, that's Nigel. Nigel does like to come up with the off-the-cuff arguments and ideas. He does. He likes off-the-cuff policy. Now, I remember we had quite a long discussion about this, about where we should position ourselves in the event that we lost. And the overwhelming agreement was, well, if that's what Britain wants, we will abide by Britain's decision. Because we really do believe in democracy. We have a whole slate of policies concerning giving you more democracy, giving you more choice. The population of this country now is of a size and of an educational attainment that we can take political power away from our elected representatives and make our own decisions.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll take a couple of bits from the floor, because I think there's still a bit of something that makes it running. We'll take the gentleman here, and then we'll take the lady there.
Neil, last year on Daily Politics, you said you would vote against Article 50, even if the residents of your constituency voted for it. The fact is, you're an anti-democrat. That's what you just said in your answer. That's what you're continuing to say.
And we've answered that one. Thank you very much. That's a good point. And then we'll take the lady here.
I am alarmed that the education of this country, so poor, that any manifesto has become the diagnosis manifesto. And I realise that the Prime Minister has diabetes, but if she had dementia, what would happen? And that is a problem, that more people actually have dementia.
I'm going to come back to you later, because I'm just taking Brexit questions.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just Brexit at the moment. It's a very good issue. So just Brexit at the moment, we're going to move on any second now. Yeah, so just not excuse them.
If you up front say you're going to restore the customs union, which gives complete control of the EU, how on earth are you going to negotiate a decent deal if you've already given away, and also you have another referendum, they'll then realise they have a chance to scupper any deal. How are you going to get a decent deal when you're giving away the horse straight away?
Very, very good. Right, I want to move on. If we have to move on, you've got the positions on Brexit. I think we all know where the candidates come from. Good discussion. You may make a very quick comment.
This is one issue that has really annoyed me throughout the referendum campaign. The repeated downgrading of Britain's greatness. No, you're not what I'm going to say, because the green chap here very rightly brought up the issue of Elizabeth Fry. We've had Simon Hughes here. The point is this: the equality legislation, health legislation was brought before we ever joined the EU. much of it, we had the Equal Pay Act in 1970, Racial Relations Act, mid-60s. There's been a lot of progress, the liberalisation in the United Kingdom before we ever joined the EU. And I want to make that quite clear, because I find it quite insulting to this country to have this idea that we are backward. We're not. We're in fact very advanced, and the EU is holding us back.
That's what it is. Right. I want to turn to housing, because a lot of questions were submitted on housing. And I am going to ask Simon Elmer. Is Simon? Yeah. Simon, can you put your question on housing? It brings us a little more local, which I think is good. You run a Go ahead.
My question is, in the event of being elected, will the parliamentary candidate support or oppose the programme of estate demolition that is currently being implemented by Southwark Labour Council across the constituency? There's a sub-question to this. Is the Haygate estate, which is within this constituency, just to remind you, demolition of 1,200 council homes, replacement with about 2,324, of which 82 are going to be for social rent, which has built homes, two-bedroom homes at £725,000. And on the new development at Trafalgar Place, every single home sold so far has been bought by overseas investment, not to live in. Is this a model of estate demolition and redevelopment, which the candidate would intend to support or oppose in the Old Kent Road opportunity area, which I don't know if any of you heard about this, which similarly threatens the homes and indeed the lives of thousands of constituents in this.
I co-founded a group called ASH, which is not the anti-smoking one, it's Architects for Social Housing. And we have other people raising this very same point. Susanna Dobson, 100% of the flats that have been sold, the latest South Garden Castle have been bought by overseas investors. What will you do to ensure there are affordable homes for local people? Robert Dental asked something rather similar. I could go on. There were a lot of questions on this. Neil, do you support Labour Southern Council's policy on Haygate in particular, because it gives us a good example of where we're coming?
Well, the Haygate example that's been cited was emptied when the Lib Dems and Tories ran Southwark Council. So when you target Labour with that, you need to remember when that policy came forward. The Labour manifesto puts forward what we want to see: 1 million homes with 500,000 either council or housing association homes. And Southwark Council is struggling. Right? Now, Southwark Council has the biggest council house building programme anywhere in the country, and Labour councils build more council homes than Tory councils, who build more homes than Lib Dem councils. And when you go to vote on June the 8th, you have the chance to back that manifesto, to give councils more resources to actually build the homes we need when Southwark's got 10,000, or, in this constituency, and with respect to the other candidates, you can choose to go, actually, when he had the chance to be in government and make a difference on housing policy, cut the council's budget by £200 million, cut the Homes and Communities Agency budget by 80%, and that's the agency that provides money to councils to build genuinely affordable homes and increase pressure on the council. But we'll tell you today it's all the council's fault. That Labour council bashing is because he's ashamed of his own record in government and doesn't have, a leg to stand on when it comes to housing.
And can I just ask you very specifically, do you think what happened at Haygate was a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm on the record on this for years. I was a councillor here. I have said for years, it was not the Aylesbury in Campbell and Megan, but the Haygate was the best deal in very bad circumstances. That's what I've said on record. And I was, as a councillor here, I was under pressure from residents, because when I was elected in 2010, the Haygate estate had been empty for years, and we know what was happening on that estate, and we know that the council did a deal that they felt was best in those circumstances. And it was not the ideal deal. It was not, I think the council perhaps could have got more in hindsight, but there was also a commitment in that deal to make sure that as homes are sold, then more genuinely affordable homes in council homes should be funded from that kind of deal. But I'm not into the council bashing, and this is a general election member, but I'm not into the council bashing because if Southwark Council has lost that money from central government and wants to work in partnership with Peabody and Notting Hill to build genuinely affordable homes and the private sector, and we should not lose track of the fact that through partnership work with the private sector, in the absence of a partnership government, the council has built brand new, highest quality, highest environmental standard council homes right on Blackfriars Road near the Thames, next to Tower Bridge, on Long Lane, or Willowcourt. Those homes are appealing, and they are the best standard for Southwark residents.
So, Madam, you were trying to speak, I'd like to hear you.
Yeah, I want to ask about affordable rent until
what were you shouting? Did you
I was heckling him.
And what was your point when you were
My point was, what are the candidates going to do about providing housing, not affordable, which could be up to 80% of market rent, and Southwark's own research shows that the majority of people on average wage in this area could not afford an affordable rent. And much of what Neil is speaking about is about affordable rent, which is not affordable. Okay. What are the candidates going to do to provide social rented accommodation?
Simon, Neil raised the Liberal Democrats' view of this. Can you tell us the answer? How you would answer the question?
Yeah. I'll give you a direct answer, Simon. I'll support you. I'll work with you, and I'll support you. And the reason I'll work with you and support you, apart from the fact that I've been around campaigning on these issues for a long time, is that when the Labour Council wanted to demolish the Pullens estate, I was there with people, some of whom squatted the estate to make sure it survived, and mercifully it has survived, on a cross-party basis. When the Haygate had problems, I was a Member of Parliament, the decision was taken by the residents that it was going to have to be demolished because the central heating didn't work and the lifts didn't work and it was not possible to renew the infrastructure. That was a decision where there was an agreement by the residents. We negotiated a right to return. The rewriting of history, and I'm afraid this is a place we're in the church, but we're loudly angry in churches, as the priest in charge will tell you, and rightfully so. This is why I'm very angry with the local Labour Council. I'm very angry because they did a deal with Lend-Lease, which was for 25%, not the Southwark standard, which is meant to be 33%, 25% of the 35. It was done for 25%. And that was affordable and in the general sense, which produced, as you rightly said, under 100 socially rented homes. Completely unacceptable. And the answer to the combined question is, where do we go from here? We need to work with tenants and residents to make sure that we don't get this council, which probably has the worst record of any Labour council in London, in doing sweetheart deals with developers to produce estate after estate which are empty because they're sold off-plan abroad and nobody lives in them often, or people have them as second homes which they visit once a year. And if you look in our manifesto, you'll see we're committed not just to a 300,000 target year, but to an end to the right to buy, if that's what the council wants, to an end to letting and selling abroad before people locally have a right. And I personally have made a commitment that if elected, I will challenge every single application that comes before Southwark Council which does not have 50% affordable housing in it. We have to say to the developers, develop if you will, but develop for the people, not for profit. And we'll do it here, and I'll do it with you.
Very quickly, just to say what they would do and answer that question. Just a sort of first and second one. Very quick one, Jane.
Yeah, okay.
So there are two definitions of affordable housing. There's the sort of official definition, which would be up to 80% of market rent, and there's the other definition.
Clarify exactly what affordable housing is, if you like. Affordable housing is a very large category that contains a tiny percentage of social rent that is what people live in housing. It will then be divided increasingly now, affordable housing means homes at full market rent can be bought on shared ownership. That means you need 25% investment in it. Until you own 100% of that home, you are merely an assured tenant. And that's what's actually being built in this place. Can I just read my question? My question was, will you oppose or support the Southwark Council?
Let me just ask the floor to have their say and answer your original question. James, just a quick answer to the original question. What will you do about foreign ownership? How to do anything sold up down to foreign and development?
Okay, it will come as no surprise for you to learn that my housing policy is perhaps not as well thought out as the other candidates. So I'll merely say this, when we cut deals with developers, we have to cut way better deals with developers. If we don't, we're going to see a kind of Manhattanization of London, where if you're not a foreign investor or a bankrupt hedge fund manager, you won't be able to afford to live here anymore, and it will make London a much worse place to live.
Thank you. I'd quite like a little bit longer because I've got quite a lot to say on this. But listen, either Labour, council or MP, whoever's representing, are committed to building homes and proper affordable, proper social homes, or they're not. There are 33 boroughs in London and 24 of them are Labour. They hold the keys to the house building. Now, you've heard Sir Simon say he's going to challenge every single application. I would say it's a complete waste of time. His objection will just be one of the other objections. It will just be considered as one objection. What we absolutely have to do is, there's no confidence here from the Haygate Estate, Spa Road. Southwark Council didn't manage to monitor that the affordable housing was actually being built. So they said that it should be built and then forgot to check, and the developers just carried on. So, it's about, you've got the ability to factor into Section 106 agreements, which are the agreements that the developers enter into with the council to define affordable. You've got the ability to place conditions on how the properties can be marketed. You can be quite creative with all of this. But actually, what Theresa May is doing, and what we've seen in our manifesto, is we are committed to a whole new generation of social house building. And we're not only going to just make that pledge, we're going to make sure we've got councils on board so we can extend borrowing, we can release brownfield sites, and we are going to build houses. We've got 148,000 houses since 2010 in London. It's not good enough. We could all do better. Successive governments can do better. House building is the key, and we've got to remember that homes mean security, mean closing the front door, good mental health.
And are you happy with homes being sold on plan and advertised in Kuala Lumpur before they're advertised?
No, I would.
I would say it would do on that particular issue because it's one of the most.
Intuitively in favour of markets working as they work, as you would probably imagine. What I would like to see happen is that we have a first dibs approach to make sure that developments are advertised here before they are advertised abroad. It helps nobody, it helps no communities, it helps the empty homes, so we want to make sure we've got.
Okay, we're going to pass on to John.
So yes, I am opposed to knocking down council houses. The council does a terrible job of actually keeping up council homes, which is part of the reason why they then claim that they have to actually knock them down, because they haven't kept up the renovations and refurbishments of them. They need to do a lot more work in terms of actually having consultations with the residents who are living on those estates to make sure that the plans that they actually come up work for them and not for the council. And can I just point out one thing? Council houses, the council is not actually a private owner of property. Council houses are actually the people's houses. They actually belong to us, effectively. They are there to support us. So we need to be the ones who benefit from them, not the council. And just on the point around Southwark, they gave £1 million to take on, so I don't think they can be that short of money.
They can be short of money and just wasting it. Elizabeth.
I'll be as quick as I can. Number one, there has to be a moratorium on right to buy in Southwark until demand can catch up with supply. There has to be a moratorium. I accept, of course, that it is most people's ambition to own their own home, but without sufficient housing stock to go around, there has to be a moratorium. That's number one. Number two, there has to be a register of empty homes. It is a criminal waste that so many properties in the area are unoccupied and could be put to very good use. Number 3, end sweetheart deals. I'm totally with Sir Simon on this. Yes, we do have to have far more governance to what goes on with councils negotiating with overseas investors. No more sweetheart deals. Of what use is a couple of £1 million to the local residents? Yes, it makes the Southwark Council accountants' books look good, but it doesn't assist the residents. With the recent Haygate estate, as I'm sure you're aware, the Lend-Lease had a problem with one elephant, as I believe 24 million was handed to the council, 20 million went to a leisure centre, and 2 million was going to be used for local housing. I don't see that 2 million is going to go very, very far at all. UKIP's policy is to build on brownfield sites. We estimate we can actually build about 2.5 million new homes on brownfield, but clearly there needs to be a national brownfield sites register.
Thank you very, very much indeed. I just want to give the last word on housing. I'm going to give you the last word on housing, but I want Neil just to pick up on some of the criticisms. Essentially, the charge is that Southwark Council has been walked over by private developers and signed some really tough deals in which they could have negotiated a great deal of and they were taken for a run. Do you accept that?
I'll say this again. Southwark Council has the biggest council house building programme in the country. That does require working in partnership with the private sector and housing associations, and I think they should do that whilst we've had governments that will not work in partnership with the council. And we've got, again, and you've got a choice in June, you've got the Simon Says and Simon Does approach, because Lib Dem councillors just voted through a planning application that has 5% affordable housing in it, 5%, not 35. So you've heard what Simon said today. And on his watch, where were the policies? What did he do when he had the chance to be in government? Homelessness doubled. Homelessness doubled. And the reason we have 80% affordable rent, affordable market rent, why? Coalition policy changed it to 80% and hit our community hard. And I want the chance to be in government to make a positive difference in people's lives. I wanted to be in a Labour government that genuinely builds the council homes we need and the really genuinely affordable homes we need.
By the record of the coalition government, or do you say basically it was you don't like coalition?
Of course, I have to stand by the record of it because we came into power. Labour lost its majority. Labour plus us didn't make a majority. Some of us tried to do a deal with Labour, but many Labour people didn't want to do a deal with us. They rather go into opposition. So what was the alternative? A Tory minority government. The Queen appointed David Cameron before the coalition deal was done, or a coalition government. And I am clear that we did far better by going to temper the Tories than leaving the Tories to run the country, call another election, have a Tory majority when we would have been slated. And I personally, for example, went in to sort out the draft housing policy when David Cameron announced he wanted to end lifetime tenancies for council tenants. I said it on behalf of the party, it was unacceptable, we wouldn't agree to it. I went into the department, I went through the whole of the draft housing policy, Grant Shapps was the minister, and rewrote things that were prejudicial to council tenants. So the answer is, in lots of areas, Evan, we made progress. Of course there were things which we couldn't negotiate. Of course there were things that in a coalition you can't win the argument. Some things were Liberal policy which weren't able to deliver. But there's a whole list of things, lifting the tax threshold, pupil premium, committing to overseas development, which we did deliver. And the country, at the end of that 5 years, was in a much better place economically than at the beginning.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, I'm going to take two contributions. Housing is that topic. Okay, before we go on, Charles, I'm going to ask you to go.
Ed, I'm really disappointed with the candidate's answer to the question. You gave them every opportunity by talking about flats being sold off plan and the laser around the world. And people will see blocks over there that are being occupied and not occupied by big banks for. You gave them every opportunity to say something about globalisation, to give some backsqueak of anxiety about globalisation. And it really disappoints me that given that invitation, given the fact that this has actually been a really important part of the Brexit debate we've had, not a single backsqueak of anxiety about globalisation. Anybody on that platform?
Hold that thought. We'll come back to that. Any other thoughts on housing? Then I'm going to ask Simon to sort of tell us what he thought of the answers. But any thoughts on housing? Yes, the lady towards the back there. You stand, yes, thank you.
I don't really talk about housing, although I agree that housing is an issue in this area. I could plead to all the candidates, particularly the main parties, to stop slagging each other off. Because all it does to us, to me as a listener, is it switches me off. I don't feel engaged in the debate. If all you're doing is going back and forth in the past, the past is important to understand the present and the future. I respect that and understand it needs to be explained sometimes. But I think the main parties in particular have a tendency to just slag off. And it's actually utterly boring.
It's a very they're often very friendly, actually, when they're not on stage. You can't stay particularly in the middle there, the black feminist.
I'd just like to say the system is not sustainable for us, because there are people who work in public services in Southwark. I have businesses, and they're travelling miles. I've spoken to an ambulance driver who, after doing a 12-hour shift, then having to go back to Bromley. He would prefer to live near his place of work, but he can't afford it.
And what would you do? What would you like to see done? Is it building more? Is it allocating more via social or social housing? Or what would be your answer?
Well, it's what this gentleman said, is what is affordable, and it's these rents, not talking about buying, but just rents, start with rents, are not actually affordable for people who are working, God sends. And it's not sustainable for them. Who's going to run the city? Who's going to serve in our restaurant? I know a waitress working, she lives in Chiswick. She's working in a restaurant in West End. It's just not.
I'm going to take gentlemen standing back, so
we've talked a great deal about craft and Southwark and development in the past, but in the future we're about to see some plans for permission come up in front of Southwark Council about very large demands for development of the area. Perhaps the candidates could give us a quick précis on what their views are on those very significant developments of the communities around.
Delighted development. Delighted people ask whether you're going to support or not. You've got only one sentence each. You're going to enforce that, which is a very good specific question. You then say, pass, if you don't agree with it. Yeah. Which is all.
I support businesses in the council getting a decent deal. I think it's been really badly handled. I think everybody accepts that the shopping centre is being changed, that it's actually the uncertainty from the business owners that I've spoken to is appalling, and that the place is being run down, and being squeezed out. So,
speak up, please.
Sorry. Neil.
With the right community engagement and business engagement and involvement, and that's genuinely listening to local community, I'd like to see planning law improved so that it includes. With the right community engagement and involvement, genuine engagement and involvement, I'd like to see planning law reflect meaningful engagement, which is a social care law. My background is in social care law, and with the right business and the right amount of genuinely affordable housing, including social housing included in the development. I'll take that as a yes. Simon, with conditions.
Sorry, thanks, sir. The current plans are unacceptable. They're unacceptable. The landscape plans and the Old Kent Road plan I've submitted to the Southwark Plan consultation because they risk removing most of the small businesses, Latin American businesses in Elephant and Castle, all national businesses down places like the Old Kent Road and the Walls Road, and pricing them out of the market. That's not the way to make Southwark successful for everyone.
Quick answers from John and
so I don't support the plan as it currently stands. It's ill-conceived. The amount of high buildings there are going to create an enormously unpleasant experience of wind. Sorry, Evan, I haven't had actually much chance to speak all evening, so I don't think you're going to use this. So currently all the high-rise buildings there create an enormous wind tunnel effect, which makes it a very unpleasant place to be. There's no consideration around the transport there. The Northern Line is already incredibly difficult to get onto there, and having an additional 1,000 people there is going to make it no more fun. And the traders there, as John has already talked about, are not really being considered. So currently I would not support the plan. Whether I support a different one, I'd have to see one.
Elizabeth, keep it very brief.
Yes, it seems grossly unfair to result in many of the businesses in the Elephant Castle, particularly those of the Latino community, having to give up their livelihoods, which is really unfair. I understand that the offer of a 10% of the shop leases to go to such businesses has been rejected by Delancey, which is really unfair, so I would oppose it. I don't think it's good for the community. One thing I would like to add, though...
What I'd like to do is get the panel to answer Giles' question. Giles raised this issue about globalisation. And Siobhan has said instincts are in favour of markets, which is a perfectly fair position, and it is where one thinks the Conservative Party are. But I'd like to just hear whether you have concerns about globalisation, whether you're broadly in favour of it, whether you think it's worked, or whether you think it needs to be slowed down and we need to think more about local communities, even if that means some protection and rules against foreigners. So comment each on globalisation. It is the defining issue of our time, and I'm actually going to go other way up the line to the start.
UKIP has been against globalisation, very much so, and considers that it is not in the best interest of the ordinary citizen of the United Kingdom. It's resulted in a free movement of labour, which has hit the low-skilled market in the United Kingdom very, very badly indeed. Furthermore, it's resulted in very significant overcrowding with NHS, school and housing spaces. So UKIP has been opposed to globalisation. Clearly, there's a difference between corporate globalisation and capitalism. UKIP does support free market capitalism, but not globalisation. Furthermore, we were just talking about the Delancey development. That, of course, is funded by Qatar. And we have the big issue going through Parliament right now, the crimes, the Criminal Finance Act, whereby it's going to be a criminal offence now to deal with monies coming in and out of the United Kingdom if it can be shown that the sources of the monies are involved with tax evasion or breaches of human rights. So I think that slowly, we are having a movement against globalisation finance.
So on the point around property, Canada are actually bringing in some interesting laws around that, which actually make a higher rate of tax for people who are overseas and actually own property. So I think we can actually look at other countries around the world that are bringing in and having similar issues around globalisation to make sure that in fact actually that foreign investors are not getting a sweet deal, because sometimes they can do non-domicile status, etc. So we do need to make sure that the tax system is fair. Obviously trying to avoid the situation where you're losing good people coming in. Obviously part of the Brexit deal, the problem is that we're losing actually having people who have real skills coming in. An enormous part of it, I think it's about a tenth of our workforce, particularly in the NHS, in fact actually is people from other countries abroad, whether it be the EU or elsewhere. So we can't really actually cut them out of the deal and try and actually close borders, because we'd lose all those fantastic skills. The Green Party is about staying open and staying supranational, working together as a global organisation, but also actually making sure that local people do have a say on what things to do and understanding. And I do genuinely think that you can have a balance between those two things.
John, I thought the Greens were not. I thought they were anti-globalisation. They were a party in favour of localisation, and they didn't like food trade. They thought we should grow more about food locally, and they were the original anti-globalisation. They were protesting against the World Trade Organization back in 1999. I was protesting about global trade.
Well, I think the green movement itself is actually a pretty international one, and unfortunately, obviously, air, water, these are all things that move across borders. So the Green Party actually does focus on international ways and means. We believe in actually supporting things like the UN and the EU to make sure that everybody is supported in a way. We are part of an international community, we do have to recognise that. Absolutely. When you're looking at whether or not you're getting your food from down the road, the local farmer, or whether or not you're having it sent around the world, then obviously we would go for the local farmer, because absolutely we are having less pollution as a result of that. As I say, I do think it's possible to think globally, act locally.
Simon, globalisation.
I share the last few, John, think globally, act locally. Giles, if I'm re-elected, I would like to have a serious, long conversation with you in public about this issue here. I know that you are pro-immigration, but pro-Brexit. And I don't share that view, because the benefit of the European Union, and one of them, is that they have been able to hold multinational and international corporations to account. At the moment, what happens is companies move around to avoid responsibility, and there's no organisation that can deal with that. And it's a huge question. starts with climate change. People move because of climate change around the world, so they migrate. That produces refugees. We then have the consequence of that on us, and we've never really worked out what we need to do. We have really poor international ways of holding the private sector to account. Thames Water, owned in Australia, with its 8 levels of company, some are in tax havens like the Cayman Islands. Completely unacceptable, but there's a lack of transparency. So every day we have it often on Newsnight and other places. We have to have a conversation about how the publics of the world take control of their destinies. And people like the World Bank and the WTO, World Trade Organization, have often not been helpful. The World Bank saying to countries like Uganda or places in East Africa, we will give you money, but only if you privatise your water service, for example. There are some really huge international issues, and I hope we can come back to this, because you're right to raise it. It's not going to be resolved in one question and answer session before the election. And we have to make sure that we remind people that we're interconnected citizens, not only on one island, as UKIP often would like us to think we are, but that what we do here affects people in the poorest parts of the world, the Sierra Leones, the Somalias, and everywhere else.
Simon, Emmanuel Macron in France was avowed globalist in his politics. He was implicitly supported by the IMF and all these international institutions who were desperately hoping he would win. Would you like the Lib Dems to be the Macron party?
Well, he's a Liberal, and if you read his speech on the inauguration, you'll see it, and I commend it to people. You'll see that the 3 things he highlighted as being the great global challenges were climate change, migration and refugees, and terrorism, and they're related. And I commend them, and I would absolutely stand by saying those are 3 of the biggest issues in the world, and therefore, yes, I regard him as a European Liberal in favour of a more united Europe in an internationalist collaborative world.
Neil, before you answer Giles' question about globalisation, would you like Labour to be the Macron party in the UK?
Yes, in that anyone who defeats fascism, it should be congratulated and celebrated. I consider myself more centrist. Yes, that's probably a better way to, if that makes me similar to Macron, then so be it. This global point, we have more in common than that which divides us, and this links to the point at the back. Thank you. It links to the point at the back. You know, if we're unfriendly, then because this is an election, then we should remember what Joe Cox said. And it's today we were asked by Brendan Cox and the Joe Cox Foundation to pause in campaigning to remember her words. And I genuinely believe we achieve more together than we ever can alone. That's it. The housing crisis. You know, even the City of London corporations are building social housing. They recognise that there is a housing crisis, and they are investing in London in more social rents, including here. I'm working with them here. They're bringing forward plans in Bermondsey for 700 genuinely affordable homes. They know that the workforce is being squeezed. We've had declining real terms incomes, and rents have continued to go. Labour's committed to doing more on that. We haven't talked too much about the private rented sector, but there are issues around rental conditions that Labour wants to tackle nationally, and that Southwark Council is trying to tackle with the Registry of Landlords right here in Southwark. There are also measures around capital gains tax, because we know that would put off pressure both for those who want to buy to rent and international buyers. But the reason that capital gains tax is really important is because there are people buying as investments and not as homes. And I think that changing the capital gains tax would diffuse some of that, would dampen some of that speculation. I think that's completely relevant. And on Help to Buy, on a very technical point, I put pressure on Osborne. He was beginning to get it, and I've been putting pressure on Hammond around Help to Buy, because one of the reasons that developers say they sell overseas is because Help to Buy doesn't work in London. In the first 2 years it was running, from 2013, it helped no one in this constituency, because London's market is out of control, and it's easier for them to sell there than have those conditions in Help to Buy that limit people's opportunity to buy and be able to move in within 6 months. But Sadiq is also tackling this as well, and this is specifically about globalisation. Before you tell me off, he has said, and Siobhan, you nicked the term, but it's his first dibs policy. So if you where affordable housing and genuinely affordable housing is built, local prioritisation should occur. So if you have a local connection, you should have the chance to buy affordable homes before they're put on the international market. Sadiq is bringing that forward. It was in Labour's 2015 manifesto, and I'm working with Sadiq to try and make sure we get some of that here, especially around the Bakerloo line extension going forward.
Thank you. I think Giles is right. It did form part of the Brexit decision. I think we saw it form part of the American elections of globalisation. My personal view is globalisation needs its own PR agency. We know that global poverty has gone down. We know that London is a very tolerant melting pot full of many different people, cultures, and all sorts of things that we love, and that's why we love this great city. And I think that globalisation gets blamed for some other issues, for example, the rise of technology that's taking jobs, and we need better education to make sure we're looking at future jobs. Pressure of housing, it's not necessarily all about globalisation, but we know that we need to tackle those things so we can focus on it. Now, once we can't forget though that London is a collection of villages. I mean, I was at the Kennington Cleaver Square fete today, and it's just ace. There's loads and loads of people, everybody getting on, drinking lemonade, and so collection of villages. We've got wonderful communities. Localism Act created things like the neighbourhood development plans. We've got an ability to shape and think about our communities, an ability to put conditions into housing development plans if we are so minded and if Labour councils stand up for them. But it isn't all bad. I think it's something that we absolutely have to think about, and those things that we're worried about can be fixed with me.
Yes, briefly. As someone who's lived in and worked in Tokyo, Tel Aviv, Sydney, Augusta and Amsterdam, it would be churlish of me to say that I wasn't a globalist, but clearly globalisation is causing uncertainty amongst many people. Obviously it provides a lot of benefits, but there are threats, and the threats and externalities posed by globalisation, I believe, have to be far better managed by supranational organisations such as the EU. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, now look, I want to get to the closing statements in about 17 minutes. And we've got another 3 topics. So, what I want to do is I want to put a couple of questions. We'll get a couple of questions put, and I want these to be quite appropriate answers. You should each make your point so people know where you stand. I wonder whether John Stewart is here. John Stewart, are you here? I don't think he is. I'm going to read John's question, and then answer it very quickly in the order. Aircraft noise is already a problem in large parts of the constituency. There are fears that the third runway at Heathrow will make things worse. What is the candidate's position on a third runway? John,
I'm guessing you can all guess my answer on this one. I'm opposed to the third runway. I think that we just need to look at whether or not there are better ways of transporting people and goods in an ecological way. I'll leave it at that.
Elizabeth, third runway.
It's UKIP's policy to oppose the third runway. We don't think it's right for the country. It's certainly not right for the environment in that area. I'm not opposed to the third runway, actually. I think, especially as we're now looking out, we need to make sure we've got strong connection hubs, and I think there's an awful lot more to do. Air pollution, aircraft noise, absolutely has to be looked at, and I know it's being reviewed at the moment, but that's my position.
Yes, of course we should have a third runway. If London needs to remain a hub, we need a better transport links than we already have. I think it's a constant embarrassment to the UK that whenever we try and get a big infrastructure programme underway, there's lots of knee-jerk rejection of it, NIMBYism, etc. So, yes, third runway, obviously.
So I actually supported gap expansion, not a third runway at Heathrow, but fundamentally I don't think any aircraft should be allowed on any new runway that doesn't meet the latest noise and environmental standards. That should be the condition of any further airport expansion.
You are against, I mean, there's pro-gap and Heathrow expansion. And if the applicant doubled out,
Then, as I say, the condition, sorry.
so then you would support.
Yes, with conditions, yeah.
Last word, Simon.
The conditions are obviously important anyway. I've campaigned always against Heathrow expansion. I don't think we ought to be building new airport expansion in the southeast. I think there's a huge need for devolution of capacity around the rest of the country. The imaginative solution, which is the best one, is to have a fast land connection between Gatwick and Heathrow, which would actually allow them to be connected like there are in some other parts of the world. But we suffer here, not nearly as much as people in West London. We also suffer from other things like excess helicopter noise and all sorts of other issues. But there's a real big issue. John, who's a great campaigner, is right to bring it up. No to Heathrow expansion, and I hope somehow we can persuade the Tory government not to go ahead, but I fear we won't.
How many here are in favour of expansion of Heathrow Airport? How many here are against expansion? So I'd say about two-thirds against, two-thirds against. Go against it,
Yes, I completely like to focus on, in the light of the Plain Hell campaign, recently launched the night flight consultation, the results due out sometime at the end of May, but not going to be debated in Parliament, and the airspace consultation, the deadline 25th of May this Thursday. What will you do in the face of growing evidence of local feeling against the regime of near-continuous, low-flying planes coming over this part of the South Country to land at Heathrow?
That question could stand and remain unanswered, because I want to move on to another topic.
But I like people to know that I'm part of the Plain Hell thing, and they can come and sign the petition.
Come and sign your petition.
Thank you.
Yes, very good. Right, I want to move on to very quickly, we got the answers on that. Is Robert Ferguson here? Robert Ferguson. Yes, Robert, your question.
My question is, we have a number of very good schools in Southwark, hard-working teachers, but what would the candidates do about the problems of underperforming schools and underperforming teachers, problems which blight the prospects of our children?
Thank you, Robert. So the question is, what would the candidates do about underperforming schools and underperforming teachers? Siobhan.
Thank you, Robert. So I'm state school educated, school governor, and I also scrutinise children's schools and families at Camden Council. So I understand the pressures on parents and children, and I know that there are pressures on schools at the moment. I know that the funding formula that was proposed and gone through consultations, only a consultation at the moment, has been a concern for London schools. I lodged a objection, effectively it's very detailed, hellishly complicated consultation. I lodged an objection, and we have seen this week in the Conservative manifesto there's a $4 billion extra into schools. It's the highest funding at the moment, but in terms of what I want to do to make sure we've got good education for our young people and allow them to move out so they can go on and get jobs and things, is we've got to give parental choice. I do think it is important. I think the rise of free schools and academies have been very beneficial here. We've got 2.8 million children, sorry, 1.8 million children more in good and outstanding schools than we had in 2010. We've got teachers that feel comfortable. I know that schools I work with, teachers have choice at how they teach, and they have more flexibility. So there's always more to do. Our children are our future, and it's incredibly important that we get policy right, and we don't fiddle with it too much.
How do you wrong with the funding changes that your government, your party is proposing, which would take very large amounts of money away from London and Amber?
So ultimately the funding formula consultation is because it's designed to address historic unfairness. So across the country they're trying to rebalance. Now, what unfortunately did was where schools have been heavily funded and really looked after, like London has done with great success, it meant that there was an imbalance here. But actually, what the government and the Conservative manifesto is doing is $4 billion and a commitment that no school will lose out on funding. So I feel that the issue has been dealt with in the manifesto.
Okay, did you want to go on this? I'm going to let I'll let the two guys John and Elizabeth very, very brief comment.
So around education, I know that my sister is a teacher, and she has spent the entire last 2-3 months just in constant fear that Ofsted are coming and they're going to come at some point. Unfortunately, as much as I hate to admit it, there is studies that show that league tables actually do help improve quality at schools, but the amount of pressure that teachers are under and the amount of time they spend going through rigorous controls around marking and the standards that they're supposed to, they don't have time for teaching. They're absolutely knackered. My sister spends all of her time actually relearning how to mark books. So I would take a lot of that pressure off of teachers. I would allow them to go back into classes and I would allow them to actually teach. And also I would actually train headmasters better. A lot of headmasters end up in positions because they've been teachers for a long time and they're not necessarily the best at actually managing their staff. So I would actually support headmasters to make their schools better by managing their staff and their people.
John, it's so interesting what you said. You said the evidence is that it does degrade standards, but you would oppose it anyway.
I'm not saying I'm opposing each other, what I'm saying is that I'm opposing sort of my sister basically, they go through situations where they're told that you have to mark this in a green pen, and this in a blue pen, and this in a pink pen. That's not actually what is making standards go up. The league tables and actually sort of making sure that schools are checked actually does help them to perform better. But yes, the administration that they're going through is insane.
Simon.
Thank you. Robert, I don't accept the premise of your question in a way, in the sense that certainly primary schools and absolutely certainly secondary schools in this part of London have hugely improved in recent years. I give credit to the Labour government, who made a huge difference in investment and standards, and Adonis and other people. Transformation. There were great empty schools with nobody wanting to go. Walworth School, Geoffrey Chaucer School, they're full. There are waiting lists. Ark Academy, Oasis Academy, Harris Federation, Roman Catholic schools, Church of England schools. I'm a chair of the governance of a primary school, trustee of a secondary school. So there are very few underperforming schools, but the regime for dealing with them, in my view, is very effective. Things happen very quickly. The two things that will make the biggest difference, because the problems we have are a shortage of applicants for teaching posts because of the housing cost, referred to by the lady over there, who can't afford to come. And therefore we need the same sort of scheme as we used to have in the ILEA and GLC for housing for teachers to be expanded. And we need to recruit many people in mid-career who would actually love to come back to teach, to bring more mature people into the classroom and have a really big effort to do that. But we do deal with failing schools quickly, they are turned around quickly, and it's imperative that that should continue because it's a life chance for everybody going through.
You support a parental choice? The emphasis with open for all?
Well, it depends what the question implies. We shouldn't be spending money, as the Tories, particularly Theresa May, obsessively wants to do, in creating more grammar schools, which cost money that should be going back into the education system. We will, in the next government, if I'm elected, seek to reverse the education cuts which she's threatening, although it's gone to she's put on the back burner before the election. There is parental choice, and mercifully in this borough, more parents get the first choice of schools now than have at any time in the future. It's impossible to have 100% parental choice because schools can't immediately expand to meet the numbers available. But failing schools, our school, St James's and Bermondsey, took over a failing local authority school, and now it's a school that's popular and the parents are very happy to choose it.
So, again, I don't get into the blame game on this because, I mean, even recently, I think it was The Independent who contacted me to criticise a school that slipped in its, its ratings and its standards. I think it's much more important to work in partnership, bring forward better governors, work in partnership with other schools that are performing really well, and make sure that you bring forward the right team, and look at the reasons behind it. And we've seen class size grow, we've seen the number of unqualified teachers entering the classroom, and we've seen resources slip. So now the government put on the table £5 million worth of education cuts for Southwark alone, and they said that that was fair. Well, there are 35 schools in this constituency, and every single one would lose out under those plans. And those schools have greater pressures than many outside London. So on recruitment costs, St Saviour's and St Olaf spent more than £100,000 on recruitment alone last year, just to get the teachers in the room. The Globe Academy had to cut tech classes because it didn't have the resources to run it. That's before you get to the kind of cuts that the Tories want to impose. And if schools don't have the resources to meet the demands that are here, then we have to examine that and make sure we bring forward the resources, as is in Labour's manifesto. And don't forget that here in Southwark, we are an incredibly diverse and vibrant community. And there are, as part of that, schools are committed to bringing and making sure they've got the funding for teaching assistants for children with special educational needs, and for all those children locally that have no recourse to public funds. As a result of coalition and current government policy, there are families who are not entitled to any support. Their children are British children, they've been educated in our schools. Surrey Square School has about 40 children that are from families with no recourse to public funds. They need the resources, the welfare support to make sure those children get the best education. And we have a higher number of children in schools locally who have English as a second language. So London schools need the resources, not just the resources they have now. Some have had cuts, English Masters have had cuts, there's other schools locally that have had cuts in the last few years. They need better resourcing to equip our children to have the best opportunities that living at the heart of London should provide.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, I'm going to ask the candidates to make a last 1 minute section, not just private cut, in a minute. So they each have one minute. We're definitely going to be out of here by 9. We need to do this. It's quarter to 9 now. Okay, so we've got a few minutes, and I want to take any questions that may be directed at one panellist or another, any issues that we haven't discussed, and I may or may not put them to the whole panel. I probably won't. And we'll start with the lady who wants to raise the issue that you mentioned. Yes, that's you.
I think that this rock have good health. And unfortunately, more people don't have good health than do have good health. We have had, by stealth, a privatisation of the health service. And St Thomas's Hospital, blood tests are done by one company and x-rays by another. If any of you go to a sex clinic, it's run by Virgin. It's not funny, this is the reality. So we have to think about that. But can I just say,
very, very good, because I think there's going to be a few comments.
Those people who are currently being legalised by the Conservative government are those with dementia. And those people are seen as slow blockers. Why? Because we can't pay services. Do not tell us how to do it.
You're very good. The care plan is essential and to be allowed to keep £100,000 in value for a house, but otherwise you pay for yourself. Neil, do you want to say anything? Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. As tight as I can. One of the reasons I got into policy and politics was because my mum has a mental health condition. She has schizophrenia, and she's had it since I was a child. Care services weren't there. This isn't. I mean, dementia is a growing issue in society. The Tories want to tax, charge people for that. Actually, there are also a lot of people who live with conditions like schizophrenia. One of the we should be pleased in this country that children with things like learning disabilities are surviving into adulthood, but that does come with additional support needs. And I've worked on social care policy because of my family background for many years. I was writing about a national care service back in 2007, which would have adopted Dilmor's principles, funnily enough, and I'm glad to see it in the manifesto. It is something we should have. It was undermined by the NHS reorganisation. We used to have, in Southwark, the chief executive piece for the Primary Care Trust was the Director of Social Services. We were trying to work in partnership here. The coalition undermined the ability to do that and took £4 billion out of social care.
And then, Siobhan, you can have a sentence, just a sentence, whether you support your party plan or not.
There's no such thing as a dementia tax. It is if you want to look after dementia patients. My mum has been a nurse 45 years. She's in a recovery unit at Southwark Hospital. We want to look after dementia patients, which we absolutely do. And I love the fact that we are talking about this more. Is that we've got to change the categorisation of their care, and it's only when you change the categorisation of the care from home health to medical that we will actually see the change. But in terms of the policy that we are sort of alluding to at the moment, we are quadrupling the amount of money that people will be able to support, to be able to retain. We're making sure that people will be able to stay in their homes
if they were unwell. And what this policy absolutely does is it makes sure that people will get good quality care with more money going back into the social care system, but the money will be going back into the care. You know, I've heard from Labour and the Lib Dems that there wasn't enough money in social care. We're putting it back in, we're still being criticised. There's more to do, particularly on dementia. I completely agree with that.
They will both be paying for themselves. Simon, will you just quickly?
Very briefly. You're right, Madam, to raise this. It's a growing issue because we have more older people, and therefore there are more people with dementia and Alzheimer's. Our public commitment is to vote for a penny extra on the income tax to go into ring-fenced health and social care. That would produce £6 billion. We're committed to £1 billion of that going into mental health services, which need to be treated equally with others. And it is absolutely imperative that we move to a system where health and social care are joined up in a way that makes sure that people who want to stay at home can stay at home and be supported, but that when you need to have acute or hospitalisation, you can have that. But it requires the money, and it will go on requiring the money, and I've never been ashamed to say we need to collect more money from people, particularly the well-off, to pay for it.
So, how many people support the idea of putting up a basic rate of income tax to pay for the public service, and how many are against the idea of raising, well, about 98% in favour of higher tax? Right, here's how we're going to go now. We're going to take 3 points from the floor, then, with no answer from the panel, then you've each got a minute, plus you can very briefly answer 30 seconds. One of the points will be clear. So, sir, at the very back in the corner, your point, please.
Hi. 14 local children from this constituency neighbourhood have written to all the leaders of the main parties on the issue of air pollution. We live in an air pollution hotspot. All the main party leaders have responded and have agreed to meet with them and sign the Children's Clean Air Pledge, committing to introduce a new Clean Air Act within the first 100 days, published one. The Conservative Party have refused to meet them. Will you personally, as a Conservative candidate, agree to meet the children, sign the pledge and encourage your party to respond in the way the other parties have? It's a non-party political issue affecting children's health.
Thank you very much indeed. Gentlemen, right here in the front row, very quickly.
I just want to quickly ask about a housing point. I think it's a specific aspect of the question that Rockland was asked, which is about viability and how would the candidates tackle that sort of thing.
Need from the developers, viability studies that allow them to say, oh, we can't afford circular housing, sort of thing. And we'll take the person very back. Yeah.
Southwark Council employs more people on a six-figure salary than any other in the country, and 30% more than comparable London councils. Do the panellists think this is acceptable?
And you're only allowed to answer one of those 3 points. You only have 30 seconds to answer that, and then you have your 1 minute summary as well. Okay, you're going to go in the same order as we started. So James first. Where's the mic?
Thanks. I didn't get a chance to answer the education question earlier, so I would say that the central plank of my education policy, which is the removal of religious teaching from primary schools, I think would be a very quick and instant way to make children a lot smarter. To get to my summary, I'm really just going to reiterate what I said before. The country is divided, and the blame lies. Sorry. The blame lies fairly with the mainstream and established political parties that have been guilty of politicking rather than coming together and making policies which would have made better arguments in the EU referendum. As I said before, if there's ever an election in your lifetime when you think it might be a good idea to abandon tribal habits of voting, this is the one. I would encourage you all to think independently and vote independently. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So on the viability aspect, there have actually been studies that have shown categorically that council homes actually are affordable over time because they actually sort of reap back the money. So in fact, actually, if developers don't want to build the land, I would suggest that councils actually buy that land back and then build the homes themselves and then actually reap back that money over that time and mean that people have affordable homes directly as a result of being council homes. In terms of the Green Party, so yes, we're a party of localism. We really support, in fact, actually engaging with communities, consulting with people, understanding in a way that I think other parties don't necessarily do. They come in with big manifestos and they tell you what they think. I'm really interested in what you guys think, and I think that's the major thing for the Green Party that absolutely got me on board and why I joined, and that's why I think it's important to engage with a party that wants to engage with you. Thank you.
I should like to address the young boy who raised the issue about there being 46 people employed in Southwark earning over £100,000 per annum, 6 of whom are earning over £150,000 per annum, plus pension. UKIP considers this to be an absolute disgrace. It's an exploitation of the taxpayer. It must end. There has to be some legislation in place to put a cap on high local authority or high civil service tax pay. It is an abomination. There's no excuse for it whatsoever. These people are not investing their own capital into the local area. If they were, fair enough. It's an investment of personal capital. They are taking on personal risk. They are not. It's not as if they have some outstanding skill. They do not. It's an outrage and it must end. It is bleeding tax funding away from more urgent areas to areas that are wholly unnecessary. And in fact, I would go further. I'd be very interested to know tonight how much the panel would be reduced by if there was no salary, no expenses, and no pension for MPs. That would be very interesting to see. Now, with regards fair enough. With regard to the air pollution, I would be delighted to sign your pledge. And I would also I think it would be very good policy for there to be an extension of the Elephant and Castle green wall. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a green wall right up alongside Elephant and Castle.
Thank you to the gentleman at the back. I will meet the children and I'll have to give you my email address. London does have an air pollution problem. I'm not going to try and say that things are okay because they're not. I've done work on this as a councillor with travel plans for schools. I think it's a really important issue. I know the GLA Conservatives are coming up with some really good plans. So just my closing speech. So my opening pitch was that you have a fresh choice here, and you absolutely do. You have heard the Lib Dems and Labour are busy playing who is the biggest Remainer and who is the most local in this area, and looking backwards. But I think they've taken their eye off the ball. I am here. I have a clear head for Brexit. I have a clear plan for negotiations and a clear plan for the area. I'm also backed by Theresa May, who not only wants to win, she can win. She doesn't want to be a protest vote. She's already been to the constituency to see me with a mental health charity. I haven't even talked to you about mental health, but I've done so much work on mental health, got so many good plans for here. So please think about it. Just leave you with one thing. 11 days after the general election, the EU wants to start negotiations. So it is about who do you want in that seat, Jeremy Corbyn or Theresa May. Thank you.
And on the specific questions, I'm going to, within 30 seconds, link the two questions about planning and viability in the wages. So they're both council. Councils should produce what the developers tell them is the viability plan for developments, and that should be required and in the public domain. And no public official should be paid more than the Prime Minister without the express consent of Parliament, in my view, local government employees or others. This is an election where people have a choice between Labour and Liberal Democrats. That's the reality of this constituency. It has been since before the Second World War. I hope people will choose me. I hope people will choose me because of my record in the constituency. Long before I started to be the MP, I know every corner of it like the back of my hand. I know what the priorities are and the issues are, and affordable housing is at the top of that list. I hope people will choose me because I'm not going to bandy arguments about the last election or the coalition government in the past. People have to look forward. It's the MP for the next 5 years you have to choose. Who will negotiate the best deal for this constituency and the country in the Brexit and related negotiations? I hope I have the skill and experience to do that. And I hope people should choose me because my passion is to serve everybody equally, all the people, all of the time, 80 hours a week if necessary, to make sure we have the fairest society that so far we have abysmally failed to achieve in this country since the war, and it needs passionate challenge to the Tories to do so, and I think will do so more effective than a divided Labour Party in Parliament.
On the air quality issue, the Elephant Castle has the worst air quality in South London, and Notre Dame School, and I went to see the project they were doing at that school measuring air quality. Boris scrapped some of the measurements. Sadiq, thankfully, is back in control, is introducing better measures, is taking the government to court on this issue, is consulting on the ultra-low emission zones, and I want every bus that goes to the Elephant Castle to be the ultra-low emissions by 2020, and I know how important that is to local children and local schools. With the minute, in the last 2 years, I've been in touch with 30,000 people in this constituency, helping thousands of people with housing issues, homelessness issues that weren't there in 2010. That level of homelessness doubled. I've been helping people who are facing benefit changes like the bedroom tax, introduced by the coalition. I'm helping people living in poverty that wasn't there in 2010. We've seen child and pensioner poverty grow. And I'm helping people who are using food banks. 7,000 people use food banks in Southwark. I think that's a disgrace. 10% of them are in work. In work poverty, massively exploded under the coalition. And to answer this point, Elizabeth's gone, when IPSA tried to increase MP salary by 11%, I donated mine to PCAN, to the local food bank, to try and make a difference. But my point is, without the coalition policies and Simon Hughes' votes, those people would not even need my help now. I believe the positive, transformative role that government can play and should play. I believe the Labour manifesto has policies that would make that positive difference on housing, on education, on policing, on mental health and social care. And I want to keep my promise to you for another 5 years. I will never vote for anything that will harm our community, and I want the best resources for our community. Thank you very much.
Now, those of you who put up your hand and said you had not made up your minds before you came, put your hands up again. If you put your hands up before, put it up again. You said you hadn't made up your mind. Now, if you have made up your mind, lower your hand now. If you thought... no, we won't try. Ask if you thought you'd made up your mind and you changed it. It's been great. I'm sorry it's such a rush, but I hope I've given enough time to let some comments be made here, because part of this is for your next representative, who will come from this panel, is sitting in front of you, and then to hear what you're thinking. Well, I think they've got a good idea of some of the views that you've had, and I hope you have heard what they have said, but you know there's only one thing that you now have to do, which is what? What have we got to do? Vote on June the 8th! Yes, that is the only thing to do. We'll have one last clap for the panel, and then Giles will say a last few words.
Thank you for coming, everybody. Oscar Wilde famously said that the problem with socialism is that you have to give up too many evenings to achieve it. And I actually don't think that's the problem with socialism, I think that's the problem with democracy generally. And there's a number of people who've given up evenings, their evenings, and I want to thank them. I just want to thank our church wardens for giving up their evening and opening up and having it all here. I want to thank Lucy Cleave for really putting it on. Lucy's at the back there. Worked really hard and organised to make this happen, and I'd like to thank Evan for giving up another one of your evenings to do this. Thank you everybody for coming. The candidates have agreed to stay around for 20 minutes so you can buttonhole them, buttonhole but don't beat them up please, and we will be closing the church in half an hour. Thank you very much everybody.